And welcome back to American Agenda. I'm Heather Childers along with Bob Sellers. This new blistering report that we've been telling you about finds that the police at the January 6th Capitol riots were unprepared, improperly trained, and not equipped to handle the surging crowd of Trump supporters. And the report also finding this: a multitude of missteps by supervisors left the force unprepared. Officers were armed with riot shields that shattered on impact and even had expired weapons with inadequate training. Missing key intelligence about the crowds. Officials disagreed on whether National Guard forces were necessary for backing up the understaffed Capitol officers as well. All, of course, adding up to disaster. Let's bring back our panel to talk a little bit more about this. And Stacy, I'll start with you once again. You know, amongst other things in this, 104-page report, also that the Capitol Police were told to stand down, leaving many to wonder who was making that call.
So I'm trying to think, am I old enough, Heather, to remember when the Kavanaugh hearings, there were Democrats and people on the left who were storming that room. They were disrupting that hearing. They were chanting. They had, all kinds of items that they brought into the building with them. I think I'm old enough to remember that. So while I find this report fascinating, and I do think they need to update their training and equipment, and the idea that we have to solve this because of January 6th and not because of the ongoing histrionics of Democrats, as well as what happened on the 6th, it's a little tiny to me.
By the way, before we continue on this, just wanted to let you know some breaking news related to the Derek Chauvin case. This going on in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is telling its police department to be on alert. The D.C. Police Department is initiating a full department activation in anticipation of possible problems related to the Chauvin verdict. Now, the verdict isn't expected today or tomorrow. It could come next week. So as of next Monday, it's 12 hours on, 12 hours off for the members of the police department. And it's on that activation until further alert. So a lot of concern about what may happen. Now, this is going on in Minneapolis, right? This is not happening in Washington, D.C. But what happens in the courtroom there is going to affect what happens in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I was still trying to look for some information on that, but I don't have that breaking news yet. But the bottom line is perhaps, Aaron, since we have you back, perhaps the D.C. police want to at least make sure they're prepared this time around if anything were to happen, given this report that shows their lack of being prepared when the Capitol riots broke out on January 6th.
Right. I think preparedness is key, but I do believe in the Chauvin trial that they haven't even started jury deliberations yet. Right. So that will begin on Monday. I highly doubt that will wrap up because these issues are so complex and there are a multitude of charges. I sincerely doubt that this is something that's going to be signed, sealed, and delivered by Monday. Oftentimes, juries have questions. They have concerns about some of the charges, understanding some of the legal terminology. So these situations, and this is a very dire, grave situation with a ton of expert witnesses, a ton of different information that they were consuming during the trial. This is not going to be snap decision making at all. So for DC to be ready is always a good thing, but also having traveled around to many of the major cities around this country quite prolifically, I've been to DC, New York, Philadelphia, Boston in the last couple of months. DC is by far the most desolate, the most empty, the most locked down, the most austere. So it's really sad to see what's going on there, but preparedness is key.
Yeah, Nate, what did this report say to you? Did it leave you with a lot more questions, especially when it comes to some things that aren't included in it, including the FBI still searching for whomever placed bombs outside of the DNC and the RNC headquarters, and also the officer, the undercover officer who will now go unnamed, who killed Ashley Babbitt?
Well, look, there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered, but to the points that have already been made, and what's going on in D.C. right now is an illustration of this. While what happened during January 6th was obviously shameful and the people who broke the law should be prosecuted, it is incredibly difficult to take seriously the same people who have been actively justifying, if not just overlooking, the riots that happened all summer and, are overlooking really destructive riots that are happening in Minneapolis right now when they tell us that we need to care about law and order and, respect police and enforce the law against rioters when the other side does it. So it's just what's happening. The same people who are talking about how awful January 6 are have nothing to say about the fact that the D.C. police have to mobilize to protect the city from another round of riots right now.
Well, Nate, I would say to me, attacking the Capitol while we're going through a process to pick our next president of the United States, it's a little different. And here's what bothers me most about the report. Obviously, it's showing they weren't prepared. We knew that because we saw the results. What we don't know is who made the decisions. I don't know if this is a cover-up, but I don't know who made those orders. I don't know their names. I don't know their ranks. I don't know if they're politicians. I don't know if they're Republican. I don't know if they're Democrat. I don't know who was at the top making these calls, and I feel like that's not being shared with the public and needs to be.
Well, we do know who is in charge of the Capitol Police, and that would be Nancy Pelosi. She's in charge of the Capitol Police. So then the question is, was she the one that was making these calls? Because we know that half of it. Stacy, and that goes back to what we began the whole conversation with. You know, who was responsible for all of this?
Well, I mean, we've seen some reports, Heather, and I think Aaron mentioned this the last time we were all on together on this topic, that Nancy Pelosi had said that there wasn't a real need to beef up the security. And so, there's a lot of blame to be spread around. But I want to reiterate that most Americans do not see what happened on January 6th as a major news story at this point. And, you know, we're talking about coronavirus, kids not going to school, the southern border exploding, migrants being flown into all parts of the country, 60 million a week on the migrants staying in hotels. You know, another, I don't know how many tens of millions of dollars being spent on the children who are being bused to all the different locations across the country. They're staying in military bases and stadiums. Homeless are being displaced for those people, the children to be put in. They're getting in-person instruction while San Diego students are still waiting to get into the classroom. There's so much more going on. So I appreciate the report and the detail, and they should beef up their security and their training, and they should be doing their jobs at the utmost of their ability. But I am annoyed by the attention on this and its relevance in light of all of the other things that should be coming ahead of it, and the refusal to acknowledge that last night Portland and other Northwest cities were on fire. It just
they were. Yeah.
And we had mentioned that earlier, Bob, you know, in reference to taking a look at what the FBI was doing to track down everyone involved in January 6th. Is that something that they could or should be doing when it comes to other incidents like the Minneapolis riots, what happened in Portland over the summer?
Why aren't we identifying a lot of these people in these other cities where they're on fire? And essentially, D.C. is telling us right now, oh, by the way, whenever this jury comes out, D.C. is going to be on fire also. And Aaron, I agree with you. I take the train in and out of D.C. all the time. It feels like a damaged town. It doesn't feel normal. So, we can talk more coming up, folks.
Yeah, it ranked #1 in a poll that I saw, a YouGov poll. It was #1 in places across the country that you do not want to live.
Number 51 in the places you'd like to live.
Right, but we're going to grant them statehood. That's a whole nother topic.
Oh, yeah. You had to bring up that.
Coming up, tensions with China and Russia are growing. Is President Biden prepared to be tough on them? We'll talk about that and more when American Agenda continues.